A new study shows the political system is bypassing the poor.
Big money gets big givers, a reward most Americans could never afford.
This is an almost universal sense that something is deeply wrong in American democracy.
America's working class and poor communities find themselves locked out of the political process. Without resources to fund candidates and shape issues, how can they gain a meaningful voice? One answer may be a concept called community organizing, pioneered by a man named Saul Alinsky over 50 years ago.
It becomes a contest of power. Those who have money and those who have people. We have nothing but people.
Our power is rooted in our being organized people, and we are astute enough to know what our own destiny is and to go for it.
Coming up next, the Democratic Promise, Saul Alinsky and his legacy.
Major funding for the Democratic Promise was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by the following underwriters:
The mission is to remember those that didn't get homes when we get our homes, to continue in the struggle. That's where we came from. We came from the struggle.
Power concedes nothing without demand, wrote Frederick Douglass, the famed abolitionist. This is the story of ordinary people making demands for the power to improve their communities and govern their lives.
Are you ready for the resurrection of your community? Are you ready?
It's what John Dewey called the democracy is a way of life. That's the way of life, participating in public action.
This type of public action is rooted in the philosophy of Saul Alinsky, who championed new ways of organizing the poor and the powerless that created a backyard revolution in cities across America. His work influenced the struggle for civil rights, the farm workers movement, and even the very nature of political protest. In 1970, Time magazine hailed Alinsky as a prophet of power to the people and argued that Alinsky's ideas had forever changed the way American democracy worked. Yet those who clashed with Alinsky attacked him as an agitator, a hate monger, and a troublemaker. Some called him a communist, others a dupe of the Catholic Church.
Somebody who goes off in a monastery and starts praying for the salvation of mankind and doesn't do a damn thing but sits there and prays, I think that when that guy comes up for judgment, that the judge is going to sit there and say, "Why, you cruddy bastard."
Above all, Saul Alinsky passionately believed that social justice can be achieved through American democracy, but he had no illusions on how to obtain it. "I tell people the hell with charity," he once said. "The only thing you'll get is what you're strong enough to get." Saul Alinsky's hard-nosed politics emerged from the rough-and-tumble world of Chicago in the late 1930s. The city was controlled by the Kelly Nash political machine and by Frank Nitti, heir to Al Capone's empire. While the nation was mired in the Great Depression, Alinsky completed a graduate degree in criminology at the University of Chicago. But his real education came from his work on the streets. He ingratiated himself with members of Al Capone's gang to study gang behavior from the inside. Through this work, Alinsky and his colleagues were among the first to view criminal behavior as a symptom of poverty and powerlessness.
Saul was a very unusual young man, and he winds up involved with a lot of youth committees. He actually works down in Joliet Prison, and he eventually is working for Clifford Shaw at the Institute for Juvenile Research. And Shaw's the one who assigns him to this neighborhood.
This neighborhood was the back of the yards, an immense slum sitting in the shadow of Chicago's giant Union Stockyards complex, the setting of Upton Sinclair's landmark novel, The Jungle. Shaw assigned Alinsky to work the streets to learn the causes of juvenile delinquency.
This was one of the great industrial working class neighborhoods of the world. You had one of the largest factory complexes that humanity had ever created. The people working there were poor. You had this being the site of a very dynamic union drive. So if you were someone who wanted to deal with social problems, that was a very exciting place to go down to.
Wages were cut 3 times in 1 year, and with no security, there was a tremendous desire for something to give a decent life, a standard of living, and respect to the people in the packing industry. Saul came around, and he told me that what he was interested in is seeing whether an organization could be formed of all sectors of the community, so that the community should, by its own action, as a practice of democracy, work out their own destiny.
In other words, if you ever have an undue concentration of power in one sector of our society, an undue concentration of wealth in one sector of our society, the whole democratic system will collapse internally.
Alinsky was convinced that poverty, unaddressed, left America open to the influence of right-wing demagogues. He saw participation in the political process as the key to preserving democracy. In Back of the Yards, Alinsky envisioned an organization of organizations comprised of neighborhood groups, small businesses, labor unions, and most influential of all, the Catholic Church.
This was a neighborhood that was intensely organized through the churches, through what was known as social athletic clubs. These people had a very strong sense of organization that they felt very comfortable with. And the insight of Saul and Joe was, use it, don't discard that.
Joe was Joe Megan, an Irish-American youth organizer with strong ties to the Catholic Church. He arranged a crucial meeting with Bishop Bernard Shield, one of the few Catholic leaders in Chicago willing to work with labor unions.
It would have been impossible to organize Packing House the way it was done without having Catholic Church support. And Alinsky was able not only to bring those churches together with one another and along with a lot of other organizations in that community, but then to get them into a relationship with this union, which they viewed as communist.
And with the idea of seeing whether we, the union and the church and the businessmen, could forge an alliance, I was all sold for it. I told Saul, I said, Saul, you may be a pretty smooth guy, but I don't know whether you're going to be able to get me and these priests in the same room.
But Alinsky understood the nature of self-interest and its uses in bringing disparate groups together. With Megan, he organized the churches, the union, and over 100 existing organizations to create the Back of the Yards Neighborhood Council.
The first meeting of the Back of the Yards Neighborhood Council was revolutionary in American history because it showed us the way to organize communities.
Our union and the community became one and the same thing when it came to action on things that were needed. And this was at a time when the union was really building up tremendous strength and preparing to go after winning bargaining rights in one plant after another.
As the union prepared for a national strike, the Back of the Yards Council meeting demonstrated the depth of community support for its cause. Just days after the first council meeting, the union held a massive labor rally. Alinsky and Megan worked behind the scenes to set up an unprecedented joint appearance by Bishop Bernard Shield and powerful labor leader John L. Lewis, one of the founders of the Congress of Industrial Organizations.
There is no other instrumentality available to he who works than the modern labor union of America as exemplified by the Congress of Industrial Organization.
Here was a bishop saying, thank you for helping my people. That was crucial to the CIO. But in back of the yards, it also gave legitimacy to the Back of the Yards Council, which was the miniature version of creating that linkage.
One day after the rally, the Armor Company, the second largest of the meatpackers, agreed to recognize the union. It was a victory made possible through this new coalition of church, labor, and community. A new model of democratic participation was born.
When people are organized and when they have the power and they've seen the effects of their power as they move into the central decision-making tables downtown and say, we are people, and damn it, you're going to listen to us.
The Back of the Yards Council went on to win many community improvements, including a welfare station that cut the infant mortality rate in half and 1,200 hot meals each day for undernourished kids. The Chicago Daily News hailed the council as a miracle of democracy, and Alinsky gained a powerful new mentor in John L. Lewis.
Alinsky was influenced by Lewis in a lot of ways. Lewis understood confrontation the way nobody in that era did. Lewis understood mass organization. He understood gathering large numbers of people, that was power.
Oh, I think Saul got from Lewis a vision of the world. And he picked out of Lewis, through the CIO organizing drive, these stories. Lewis taught him the universals of organizing, that all action is in the inevitable reaction, that every positive has a negative and every negative, the kind of stuff we teach at 10-day training today.
Alinsky then took what he learned from Lewis and formed the Industrial Areas Foundation, the IAF, to be the umbrella organization for new organizing campaigns across the country.
What do? We have large masses of our people who are disenfranchised, dispossessed, both in terms of power and in terms of wealth. What we do is point out that there is a way through organization and through power for them to be able to do something about it.
Alinsky laid out his philosophy in his best-selling book, Reveille for Radicals, which brought him national recognition. In Reveille, he called on America's poor and working class to reclaim American democracy through the creation of people's organizations.
I think Saul got those values from home, and particularly with his work with John L. Lewis and the workers there. He saw the poor people getting pushed around there, and he didn't like it, and therefore he said, let's organize.
I think at the core of what motivated him was his mother, Sarah Rice. I think she taught him that it is the responsibility of individuals to be responsible for other individuals, and that you can't just walk away when you see something that's not right.
Well, the core of it all, Alinsky had a passion for justice. It came from his mother, it came from his experience growing up in a Jewish ghetto, it came from things that he saw around him in the middle of the Depression. The theme is there all the time.
First rule of change is controversy. You can't get away from it for the simple reason all issues are controversial. Change means movement, and movement means friction, and friction means heat, and heat means controversy.
And nothing created more controversy in America in the 1950s than the growing civil rights movement in the South. Less heralded, but no less important, was the struggle for civil rights in the North. In 1959, Alinsky met with ministers on Chicago's South Side to start an organization called TWO, the Woodlawn Organization. TWO would soon challenge the one man who ran Chicago, Mayor Richard J. Daley.
Well, Chicago in those days, remember, was completely dominated by the Daley machine. They controlled the aldermen, they controlled the vote. They were not above having people in the cemeteries voting, and the old joke about Chicago. And in fairness to the machine, they did things for their people, but you had to be one of their people. There was no way that Mayor Daley was going to give up power to any other groups.
The problem was that at that time, Woodlawn was deteriorating in certain areas where slum landlords were getting away with murder. And so we had ready targets to hit. So we went in and we proceeded to find out what the issues are and then organize around that.
Alinsky preached that power is built through issue campaigns that train leaders and prepare the organization for bigger fights. For TWO, that opportunity came when the state declared Chicago's voter rolls corrupt, forcing the entire city to re-register.
When there was a law passed that everybody had to re-register, I talked to Von Hoffman about the possibility of taking a caravan of buses down to City Hall to register.
The city tried every way to make sure we had no buses. We had contracts with the Chicago Transit Authority for buses. They took those buses away. We finally had to get buses from, these sort of Dutch suburbs halfway in Michigan.
And on that Saturday morning, we had over 40 buses, bus loads of people. And we were lining up on the Midway.
Black Chicagoans had never brought such power to bear on City Hall. On that day, over 2,000 TWO members registered to vote. And in a city where politics is like a religion, the voter registration drive changed the equation of power in Woodlawn.
It was a show of power, and Mayor Daley knew it was a show of power.
Daley was not the kind of man who would understand what was going on here. He looked upon this as a very, very great threat. And it jarred the city. It shook up the city tremendously.
It was a declaration of independence by a segment of a large group of the population, and that declaration said, hey, we're going to go our own way. We are going to develop our own policies and our own programs. And I also think it said to the power structure of Chicago, move over, buddy.
What you've got to understand realistically here is that Woodlawn got the power. And once getting the power, they were now using it. They were now engaged with making deals.
The democratic process is set up for a check and balance system. And if the people are not organized to do the checking, the balance is always going to be on their backs. And not to say that you're going to start a revolution, but to keep the power structure nervous.
All change comes about as a result of pressure or a threat. But you can't get social change or social justice without confronting. Because if you are a have-not, the haves never give you anything that's real.
Despite the dramatic gains of the civil rights movement, blacks were still locked out of the economic boom of the 1960s. Even in Rochester, New York, an affluent city near the shores of Lake Ontario, unemployment for blacks was running at 25%.
The problem was that in the midst of all of this wealth and affluence, there were people that were not included in that wealth and that progress. Suddenly, all hell broke out.
It couldn't happen here in Rochester, but it did. Just about midnight today, riots broke out in the Joseph Avenue section on the city's near north side. Race riots apparently touched off by...
It was a tinderbox. The liberal white community was nervous, upset. The Rochester area council churches got nervous enough. They gathered $100,000 from somewhere and brought Alinsky in.
We were skeptical again. What can this white man do for black liberty, black freedom, black justice?
Because of their doubts, several black ministers consulted with Malcolm X about Alinsky.
Malcolm told a group of us, said, well, the only thing that I can say that he knows more about organizing than any person that I know, quote unquote.
When Alinsky finally arrived in Rochester, he was immediately accused of creating hostility between blacks and whites.
Creating tensions? What tensions have we created? We haven't even come into the community. I've only been in Rochester for 5 hours, and all of a sudden there are tensions around. Well, I'll tell you, you do have tensions, but you refuse to look at them. What is happening now is that as a consequence of this invitation, a hidden infection is being brought out into the open.
Alinsky came in and he hit the town like dynamite. This is a southern plantation translated north. So everybody's expecting shootouts, and I have to try to build an organization.
Ed Chambers was assigned by Alinsky to be the lead organizer. Chambers knew he had to get the organization up and running before another hot summer arrived.
And then we got beautiful editorials because we called it Fight. Editorials saying, why didn't you call it Life or Light or Peace? Something, you know, non-confrontational. And so it was Fight. And it was Fight from that day on, and it was a fight.
Now everybody understands what white power is because they own the banks. But earlier in the 1960s, there emerged a new order on the stage. The order of black power. And you spell black power in Rochester with capital letters, F-I-G-H-T.
The main issue that our folk were asking for at the time was work. You know, and our cry was that people didn't have a right to welfare, but they had a right to a job. That was our argument then. Kodak had the key. If you're going to move, you got to move Eastman.
Eastman Kodak Company was Rochester's biggest employer, with over 40,000 workers in the mid-1960s. Now, as in Back of the Yard some 25 years earlier, an Alinsky organization would take on corporate power. In their first meeting with Kodak, Fight proposed a job training program for 600 unemployed community members.
The issue that we are cutting, and which Eastman Kodak's allies have cut, as to whether or not a corporation has a responsibility to the local community as well as to its stockholders, whether it has a social responsibility outside of a financial responsibility, has to be resolved, and we propose to resolve it.
Over time, Fight built enough power to force Kodak's negotiator to sign an employment agreement, but apparently without the full backing of Kodak's chairman.
And they worked out an agreement 3 days before Christmas and signed it. And it lasted, I think that happened in the morning, and I think it lasted till 10 o'clock that night.
That was when they did have real leverage on us then, because that was a pretty serious thing to do, to renege on an agreement that somebody within the company had made.
You could not describe the feeling of despondency, because now we've announced this to our people, and the first thing came to my mind was a trick. I said, you know, they didn't intend to do it to begin with. I said this was a delay tactic.
In response, Alinsky and Fight leaders devised an ingenious plan. They would buy Kodak stock, control other stock by proxy from sympathetic shareholders, and then pressure the company at its shareholders' meeting.
Somehow Alinsky acquired a few shares, and he kept making a big case that he was going to be at the annual meeting and was going to make a big issue there.
As he traveled around, he started pushing don't give us your resolutions, don't give us your nice words of encouragement, give us your stocks, and we'll vote them.
Alinsky was now in top form. At a press conference he cracked, the only contribution Eastman Kodak has made to race relations was the invention of color film. On April 25th, Kodak held its shareholders meeting in Flemington, New Jersey. Fight bussed in hundreds of its members from Rochester to protest Kodak's broken promises.
We went into the stock meeting, and people were calling us niggers and get out of here, you're not allowed here. Walked in because we were stockholders. And Bond was up, Chairman Bond, and I stood up and asked the question. I said, are you going to honor the agreement? That was the deal.
Minister Florence, you'll have to wait till it's that part of the agenda, you know, which is way down. And Mr. Chairman, We give you 1 hour to agree or not agree to honor the agreement you signed. And 10 jumped up, Saul and I, and we walked out. Cat called again down the aisles. And all the press and television came out. So then, after an hour, we walked back in. What is your answer? What is your answer? Excuse me, what is your answer? We demand to know. The answer is no. Then it's going to be a long, hot summer.
But Fight had built an organization capable of sustaining a long battle. And by creating allies in the middle class through Alinsky's stock proxy strategy, they eventually forced Kodak back to the bargaining table.
We have a new relationship. We have understanding. And you know, I just have to say it. We have an agreement.
Alinsky may have been a necessary evil. One would hope that you could accomplish all the good things we did without that evil, but I'm not sure we could have.
I would not have done what I did, I think, if it was not for meeting Saul and going through that experience. Nothing, I think, ever impacted my life as much as that.
By the late 1960s, Saul Alinsky had become something of a folk hero to many college campus activists. He challenged them to move from demonstrating in the streets to organizing people in their communities.
But one of the major theories of social change is that you build up counter-institutions to what is, and then a new society emerges.
All right,
how the hell did Christianity develop? What's the development of capitalism? It's the same thing.
You don't have a tougher, harder, more realistic operator than Paul in organizing Christianity. If Paul hadn't come around to organize a Christian church, Christ would have been another guy hanging on a cross.
Always the organizers.
We're talking about revolution, not revelation, Alinsky said in his book, Rules for Radicals. There are no rules for revolution, but there are rules for radicals who want to change the world. And to teach those rules, Alinsky and Ed Chambers set up a training institute for organizers in 1969.
They're going to be taught how to organize. They're going to be taught to be realistic, tough organizers. They're going to be...
By the early 70s, Alinsky concluded that America's poor would need to ally themselves with the middle class. If we fail to communicate with the middle class, he wrote, if we fail to form alliances with them, they will move to the right. Maybe they will anyway, but let's not let that happen by default. But Alinsky never got the chance to organize the middle class. On June 12, 1972, he died suddenly of a heart attack on a street corner in Carmel, California. He was 63 years old. By the time of Alinsky's death, his training institute had become the classroom for many social activists across the country.
The three principal people who came out of Alinsky's earlier work, Tom Gaudette, Ed Chambers, Fred Ross, then themselves have mentored generations of new organizers. So there's not any organizing, community organizing, that you can look at in the country today that probably can't be traced back to one of these three.
Cesar Chavez, Stokely Carmichael, Heather Booth, Wade Rathke, John Bauman, and Dick Harmon are among the many nationally recognized organizers who either worked with Alinsky or were influenced by his writings and seminars. But Alinsky's work also had serious weaknesses. Having tasted power, some local leaders let themselves become co-opted by political and business interests. Other organizations failed to develop the grassroots leadership necessary for long-term change. And Alinsky failed to build a national network of organizations to amplify the power of local groups.
He loved the combat, the bringing people out, and then he'd get kind of bored with it. And as a matter of fact, he was later to say The good lifespan of one of these organizations is 5 years. After that, they either die or they become part of the establishment. So I think one of the great steps forward in organizing today has been to put that idea to rest.
After Alinsky's death, Ed Chambers assumed the helm of the IAF and built it into a network of more than 50 organizations across the country. The IAF organizers and leaders are trying to create a new political culture in America, where ordinary people learn the skills of politics to remake their communities.
People don't normally get involved in civic life in our cities. We are trying to teach people to do that.
Our walls are down, there are no street signs, we're burned out, we're redlined by banks, education is poor or none at all. We do have some difficulty with law enforcement in terms of stereotypes. And so we have to make decisions about our homeland.
My name is Alberta Williams. I'm from St. Barbara's Parish in Bushwick, and I'd like to welcome you all to our EBC Fall Assembly, whose agenda is Your Vote, a Working Weapon.
Our organizations are the mechanism where people can practice on public life.
Let me just draw you a picture of what we were up against when we first started this.
You know, the Greeks wouldn't let you practice politics till you were 50 or over, because you didn't have Sophia, you didn't have political judgment. We are training laymen and women in the art of political judgment.
What you have here is a power analysis of what the city's like.
These are some of the citizen leaders of East Brooklyn congregations, EBC. They are among the thousands of people putting Saul Alinsky's ideas into action.
I didn't see myself as a leader. What I saw myself is just another person in the community. I came to church every Sunday, left an hour later, and that was it. And in the preaching at church, this was a thing that was coming forth to me. You need to be involved in your community.
I wasn't politically involved. I'm just a family person, a regular guy. But I believe, working with this organization, that we could be heroes too. Normal people, common people that go to work every day, we could be heroes in our communities, and we have to take that role.
But taking that role has not been the common experience in America. Our recent political experience has been citizen apathy, low voter turnout, what some political commentators describe as the crisis in American democracy.
You cannot go anywhere in America, rich neighborhood, poor neighborhood, in between neighborhoods, and not have a conversation about the failure of politics. This is an almost universal sense that something is deeply wrong in American democracy.
But can faith in American democracy be restored? For the Industrial Areas Foundation, the process begins one-on-one.
People begin, and democracy begins, really, in conversations.
People have to realize the only thing you get something in this country is if you work for it.
People sitting in a church basement or around a kitchen table or in a union hall or wherever they choose to gather and talking about their perceptions of public life and this society and what they might do about it if they had power.
People do mobilize, but they mobilize around issues that are of importance to them.
And once you give them that push, then they get up off their tough and they do what's necessary.
The common experience of citizens ought to be the starting point for every political debate.
We're going to go one-on-one and talk to people. The first place we're going to start is at home, which is here in the church.
But how do ordinary people acquire the skills to become players in the public arena? For IAF leaders, it starts with intensive 10-day training sessions led by seasoned organizers like Arnie Graff.
You're organizing around self-interest. If you're not around a multi-issued agenda, you're going to have only those, if you bring in only those people that are interested in education, you'll be an education organization. If you bring in only those people that are interested in housing, you're going to evolve into a housing organization. If the purpose is to build for power, okay, then you need multi-issues because you're going to have multi-interests. I didn't know Alinsky well, but one of the things that Alinsky, he did about 2 or 3 sessions when I was there before he passed away. And when he talked about this, I'd come out of the civil rights movement, right, and talk about all the actions. He asked me about evaluation. In CORE, we just didn't do it, you know. The evaluation, where's the next demonstration, right? I mean, that's how I, you know, was taught. And he said, well, you, young man, you're probably just a pile of undigested actions. Thought, what's he talking about? It's not like I need Alka-Seltzer or something like that. But what he was getting at was, you got to reflect on what you're doing. You've got to reflect on your action, because if you don't reflect on your action, you won't learn. The aim of it is to train and develop people, is to get more people learning and developing, more people to become public players.
In the early 1980s, after leaders were trained and relationships developed, EBC wanted to tackle one of the neighborhood's most pressing issues, housing. They set out to build over 2,000 affordable homes, called the Nehemiah Plan. But to complete the project, they needed the support of New York's mayor, Ed Koch.
They knew how to turn it on and turn it off. You came to a big open meeting, they'd bring in 500 people, they would cheer you, they would boo you, whatever it is to manipulate you, and they would seek to get you committed by putting you on a platform, asking you a question, knowing that you're going to say no, but maybe they might get you to say yes to something that you would normally say no to. I wouldn't do it.
City officials and religious leaders gathered for a ceremony on the steps of City Hall today to pledge support for plans to make thousands of houses grow out of the rubble of Brooklyn.
But EBC had built more than just homes. They also created a citizen base to challenge City Hall and other powerful institutions. In 1989, EBC launched plans to build another 1,100 Nehemiah homes in the same neighborhood.
I didn't apply for the Nehemiah homes the last time, but I'm sorry I didn't. But I did apply this time, and through a lottery system, my number is 465. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get a home, because that's the dream. That's the American dream, to own your own home.
Strange, how you doing?
Hi, fine, yourself?
All right.
What was your agenda for today?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's who we are, okay.
EBC's efforts to build the Nehemiah homes are threatened by cuts in Mayor Giuliani's city budget. At this pre-meeting, leaders discuss strategy for a rally to take place the following Sunday.
A pre-meeting is when we ask for the key leaders from the congregations to come and meet with us on an agenda.
So what's stopping the city? The mayor. That's why I said he'll be our #1 enemy if he don't come through for us.
We didn't know if we were going to get a meeting or if he was even going to show up. And so you have to start strategizing about, what if this happens? What are you going to do?
Suppose the mayor can't meet. Then what happens on the 30th? Declare war! We go to war with Mayor Giuliani. Okay? This is a planning session, folks. But we don't know exactly what's going to happen. As of today, things look good. We have the promise of a meeting. But on Sunday, we'll know for sure. Okay.
1,500 miles from East Brooklyn, on a bus traveling from Dallas to Austin, Texas, another group of citizen leaders are going to the state capitol to lobby for an innovative public education program called Alliance Schools.
We're here to give you the briefing this morning before we get to Austin.
Margie Veach is a leader in Dallas area interfaith, one of 9 organizations that make up the Texas IAF network.
I don't think I ever really appreciated what it means to be a citizen until I got involved with Dallas Area Interfaith. I think that as most citizens, I thought before that if I didn't break rules or the law and I voted, I had probably done what I was supposed to do.
Using skills learned from community organizing, parents and teachers from the Alliance schools have transformed dozens of low-performing schools from poor neighborhoods into some of the state's top performers. Now they are lobbying to increase funding for the program.
Now we got to figure out how we get to where we're supposed to go. Okay, let's see. We're going to take a minute here.
No. You got to look for the 400.
Yeah,
They may be down
there.
there.
A little further? Okay. Good morning. Hi.
How are y'all?
What we're interested in is we're here to talk with legislators about an increase in that investment capital fund. And we wanted to ask, how you feel about that fund and if you would support that.
Anytime you're doing, more funds.
We had a number of people who had never been to the state capitol before and who had never talked to a legislator. And so it was an opportunity for them to participate in the process, to understand that this is what you do. You go and talk to the people who represent you to say, I'm important to you.
I teach at Cochran Elementary. We're one of the Alliance schools, and we have been an Alliance school now for 3 years. Basically, what really makes it my passion.
Government's a very intimidating thing. And those of us who served in public office are oftentimes intimidating as well. But that person is prepared. They know exactly what they're going to say. They are given support from the other members in the presentation. And then they go in and they ask for it.
Would you be willing to stand with us at a press conference in the Dallas area to give your support to that program?
If it fits in my schedule. I mean, and I'm not trying to put you off on that. It's just there's some things I've already committed to, and if it's available, it's just slot open, then yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
Thank you so much.
I felt that for once in my life, you always think as far as politics is concerned that your opinion does not matter. And at that one instance, I felt that, here's my chance to tell my passion and how I really feel about it. And I was just excited because I was actually face to face in here. Let me tell you my story.
Dominic.
Thanks, man. How are you doing?
Come on, you got to sign this.
Chairing a meeting as big as this is probably something different for me. I know it's a role I have to step up to, and it's not going to be easy, but I think I'm ready for it. The mayor is expected to be here. We're all anxious. We're pleased to hear that. But like always, we're in the last minute. We never know how that's going to turn out. We always hold politicians accountable, so he will be confronted with the questions that we're concerned with. The building of Nehemiah homes in Western Pennsylvania and Spring Creek. I'm president of the Nehemiah Homeowners Association in the Brownsville of Brooklyn and a member of the EBC strategy team, and I will be your chair for today's meeting.
Despite doubts about his attendance, Mayor Giuliani arrives midway through the rally. Yet complete funding for both sections of the Nehemiah housing plan is still unsure.
I dreamt that maybe I could get a home, and today I have my home. And some of you that will get homes, Nehemiah homes, need to know that it's more than just getting a home, that the mission is to remember those that didn't get homes when we get our homes, to continue in the struggle. That's where we came from. We came from the struggle. Are you ready for the resurrection of your community? Are you ready?
Brothers and sisters, the mayor of New York City, Mr. Rudolph Giuliani.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. Last week, I was very, very pleased to meet with representatives of the East Brooklyn congregations. And I'm also very pleased to say that we are ensuring funding for the Nehemiah Housing Initiative west of Pennsylvania Avenue. And because we recognize the East Brooklyn Nehemiah initiatives as one of the very, very finest low-cost housing initiatives in the city of New York, we're going to make sure that there's enough funding in the budget so that Spring Creek can begin, so that it can begin on time, and so that it won't be interrupted.
Today we was asking him to personally present himself in order that our people would know that he, the mayor, was behind this. We feel victorious.
I think we accomplished what we wanted. We didn't know where it was going to go, but when it got there, it just zoomed off.
Vinny. Oh, I tell you, it's, to me, it was electrifying. Let's just give a little recognition where it's due. Irvin Dominich, I know he had...
Immediately after an action or rally, EBC members hold an evaluation session with key leaders to critique their performances and discuss future strategy.
Let's give ourselves credit for getting big-time power to react. Let's give ourselves credit for having that kind of power, having that kind of success, and understand.
The whole assembly is like a drama. And you need to know, in this drama, were all the actors good?
This week, EBC got 2 heavy-duty major officials in New York to react.
If the actors weren't good, how could they be improved? Did the audience understand the message?
The main one we got to react was the mayor.
What's our next step? Are we going to be acting or are we going to be reacting? And if we're going to act, what are we going to do?
Now, not only did we make the mayor react, but we got all the bureaucracy under him reacting too. The good news is it takes a very developed, broad-based organization to pull this off, to pull it off. The other side of the coin is, do we think any of these victories are over?
We've only just begun.
Back in Austin, the Texas IAF is preparing for a meeting with the state's education commissioner and various legislators. They'll be asked to pledge support for the Alliance Schools funding plan.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Moses. We're going through and rehearsing. Actually, this is a blow-by-blow, so we can hone the statements. We have a lot of people speaking, and we want it to be tight.
They're involved in schools, the school process, in a collaborative effort to educate all children, because we are a community of learners, school-wide.
You always want a space that's a little too small for the numbers you're going to have. We hope we have enough people that we're standing room only, because to get the attention of the legislators, we don't have the organized money. We need to have the organized people. They see a throng of people from around the state, all here for this issue. Pretty powerful statement.
Yes, we're going to beat the toss, but more than that, we're developing educated parents who are life learners. Thank you.
We've had rats invading our building for years. Our custodian found 18 rats in one classroom. 18. I put in work orders, I got no response. But our parents wouldn't tolerate rats.
Do you know that you have over 10% of the state Senate present and accounted for here today? Do you know that what you are down here asking your state government to do will in fact happen because of your involvement in state government?
There's 2 ways of looking at a rally. One is that you look at the event itself. But the other way you can look at it is also you see the action in terms of not just what you do, but in terms of the reaction. So the question I ask myself is, 6 months from now, after that rally, how will Royce West think about what happened today?
What I think today kind of demonstrated is that there is an enormous amount of support for this initiative, okay? There was, I thought, a clear exchange of power. I thought Commissioner Moses was emboldened, challenged by having as many reps and as many senators there, and I thought your statements were powerful. I particularly like when rodents turn into rats, okay? Because when we first heard the story, it was about 20 rodents. I learned a long time ago in organizing, don't talk about rodents, talk about rats, okay? Ugly, dirty, filthy rats, okay? All right, thank you very much. Go home, go rest, and then go after those guys at the Capitol.
After years of hard work and negotiations with 3 separate city administrations, EBC triumphantly held a groundbreaking ceremony for the new Nehemiah homes on October 2nd, 1996.
This is about people like me that would never have been afforded an opportunity for home ownership had it not been for EBC. And those of you that are going to own these homes, listen to this. The belief that the answers to all your problems after you get your homes are in your hands and in your minds to solve. That's what this is about.
This didn't start with the City of New York supporting you. You made the City of New York support you because you were right in what you were doing and forcing others to notice because of the good work that you're doing.
So finally, stairs come. I want to go pick me up some of that dirt. This is great. It's really great. It's a victory for EBC. It's a victory for the city of New York.
Oh, I feel great. I feel great. We've been waiting for this day for a long time.
All real action, political action, is aimed, deliberate, calculated, focused, and our actions are that way.
EBC! You go back to the 1980s, and most of the political establishment in this city opposed them, tried to undercut them, and didn't want to make it happen.
Why was the political opposition so fierce?
Because in many ways, they do not pay homage to political figures. When you come to their meetings, they require you to speak in 3 minutes, and they close you off and shut you off if you don't speak in 3 minutes. They require you to answer their questions, and they remind you that you are a public servant. And
consensus is nice. It belongs in private life. But when you're out in the public life, it's something to do with power, self-interest, change, and the ability to get that.
Back in Austin, continuous pressure on the state legislature forced passage of a funding bill for the Alliance Schools Initiative.
We have just been through a long series of meetings back and forth to Austin, working on legislation, and there's been $8 million approved for the expansion of the Alliance schools across the state of Texas. So it was a real victory, and we're really proud of it because more and more schools who are low-performing schools are going to have the opportunity to improve their schools.
Ordinary people have shown that if they mobilize and work at it and collectively aggregate their power as citizens, they can change the outcomes of government. That's doable.
Power concedes nothing without demand. It's as true today as when Frederick Douglass wrote about it and Saul Alinsky organized for it.
When a people have hope, when they have power, they have a future, they know where they're going, and they know they're going to keep getting more as they get more and more power. They know how to do it now. They know how to function as citizens in a democratic process.
I just don't think that we can lead our lives in isolation. And I think that making the world richer and better is not looking just for my own self or for my family, but I think it's looking out for the community and what can be done in the community.
Without organized people, you're going to really have communities that are just going nowhere. It's the people. That's the key. The people. That's the key. Organized.
For these citizens, the democratic promise is not found in political party tickets, nor does it hinge on a Supreme Court decision or an act of Congress. There can be no democracy unless it is a dynamic democracy, said Saul Alinsky. It is not a formula to be preserved like jelly. It is a process a vibrant, living sweep of hope and progress which constantly strives for its objective in life, the search for truth, justice, and the dignity of man.
So we're in the redemption business. You know, it's not revolution, it's redemption. We love democracy, and we love America, but we're just critical lovers.
Major funding for the Democratic Promise was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by the following underwriters: